Hey, hockey fans, welcome to the Across the Pond Hockey Podcast YouTube channel. If it's your first time here and you'd like to support us, please hit that subscribe button and that like button. It goes a long way in helping us develop the program. Before we get to tonight's episode, I have to take a minute to thank our wonderful sponsors, starting with the China Hockey Group. The China Hockey Group is a family-oriented group of ice hockey leagues, training programs, and community initiatives geared towards developing hockey in Southeast Asia. From their incredible Junior Tigers program all the way up to the CIHL, which is Hong Kong's elite full-contact ice hockey league, they have a program suitable for players of all ages and abilities. You can also stop by the Warrior Bauer Hockey Shop in Central for all your equipment needs and skate sharpening. Check out their website for more information at ChinaHockeyGroup.com. That's ChinaHockeyGroup.com. Next, we have our friends at Accessory House Global. If you're like me and your headphones look like this, it's time to head to AccessoryHouseGlobal.com for any accessories you need for your headphones. From cables to carrying cases to new ear pads, they carry products for all the biggest brands. Head to their website at AccessoryHouseGlobal.com. Use the promo code ATP20 for 20% off your purchase. That's AccessoryHouseGlobal.com. Next, we have our pals over at Wheel Hub Asia. These guys are committed to building community and bringing accessibility to inline hockey players across Southeast Asia. They're heading into the year 2 of Hong Kong's newest inline league, 3 Inline. You can head to their website for all of your inline hockey needs at wheelhubasia.com. Enter discount code ATP10 for 10% off your purchase. That's wheelhubasia.com. Next, we have our friends at Yardley Brothers Craft Brewery. Folks, if you're a craft brew fan and you're in Hong Kong, then you absolutely have to check out Yardley Brothers' incredible selection of award-winning brews. You can head to the Beer Shack on Llama Island or the Yardley Brothers Cafe and Bistro at 62 Peel Street in Central. If you can't get out of the house, no problem. Just head to their website, yardleybrothers.hk, and you can get their delicious products delivered right to your door. That's yardleybrothers.hk. Last but not least, a huge thank you to Mr. Paul McLean at Sunset Studio in Kennedy Town for always making the podcast sound great. If you're looking for a place to jam with your band or record a new song, check them out on Instagram at sunset_studio_HK. That's sunset_studio_HK. Folks, the websites and description will be in the description. All the discount codes will be there for you. Please check them out and support our wonderful sponsors. Before we get to today's episode, just a quick disclaimer. There may be some sensitive topics discussed in this episode, so viewer discretion is advised. Hey, hockey fans, welcome to Across the Pond, Hong Kong's first and only hockey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Ivany, and I'm here with the great Barry Beck. He's making his return to the podcast. We just looked back. The last time he was on the show was July 17th, 2020. So it's been 3 years, Barry, and a lot has changed since then. So first of all, welcome back to the podcast. And how have you been doing?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Nice to be back. I've been doing okay. I have my struggles, like most people my age do, especially former hockey players.
Yes.
I think once guys get over 60 years old, those aches and pains become more prevalent than they were before. But you just try and manage all that and go on and be productive.
And did they ache and pain a little bit more after what happened to your Rangers this year?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Well,
I got to get that out of the way right off the bat.
At least you're not wearing the Montreal Canadian jersey, which helps me a lot.
Okay, yeah, I saved you from that tonight. I'll explain this one in a little while.
Yeah, that was a letdown with the Rangers, the 7th game against New Jersey. You know, teams are really they're fast, and the Rangers really didn't have a fast team at all. But they do have a lot of stars, but that really doesn't matter unless you have that team chemistry to go along with it. You know, when you saw Vegas and Miami, Florida in the finals. I think Florida just ran out of gas. They had a lot to do to be able to get to the finals. and they were injured and banged up, I think, when the time they came around to Vegas, and Vegas got a big, strong, gritty team, and I think they just wore them down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before the playoffs started, I was one of the ones who didn't like the moves the Rangers made. I didn't think that much of a disruption in your top six going into the playoffs, bringing in two superstars. To me, it's a little too much. I could see maybe one of those guys and then bringing in a depth player or even a defenseman if needed. But what are your thoughts on that? Because my thoughts were this is way too much of a room disruption when you got two guys. You've already got an established top six and a team that can score, and you can bring in two superstars.
Yeah, well, they had the past 2 years they had over 100-point seasons,
Yeah,
so they've been production has been good during the regular season, but we know how much that means now.
yeah,
I mean, heading into next year. Um, yeah, I think it's look at the teams that were successful in the playoffs. I don't think there's too many fans that can name a lot of players on Vegas. You know,
I
they
know,
don't have those big superstars. Although there's a lot of players that played like superstars in the finals,
absolutely.
and there because even getting through Dallas was pretty tough.
Yeah,
Not to say that they had a lighter road getting than Florida did, just
yeah,
because getting past Boston, Toronto
I
were
know.
big
I mean,
in itself, and Carolina
yeah,
also. But yeah, I agree with you that the moves that the Rangers made, I don't think helped them. You can see that,
yeah.
and I think they got to take a hard look at that and really look at those players that are going to give you depth and grit. And you got guys that can already score. So now you got to keep the goals down against, and not have any injuries.
Yeah, that's the key. And I mean, you said it. The Florida Panthers took down three teams that were probably in the top 5 or 6 in Stanley Cup odds. I mean, Boston was one. Toronto, I think, was maybe 3 or 4 to win the cup, and Carolina wasn't far behind. So by the time they got to Vegas, like you said, a big tough team, they just ran out of gas. But overall, what was your opinion on this year's playoffs?
Well, playoff season is a whole different season. So it's
Mhm.
that first round. There's nothing like the first round where you get to watch, 4 games at a time.
I know, I love it.
For a hockey fan, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah,
And that first round is just a war of attrition. I
yeah,
mean, they're trying to hurt each other, and they as the rounds go on, you will find a groove that you get into because you can't play like that first round every round. You
correct.
can,
Yeah.
you can get better, but the physicality of it, you start to pick your spots a little bit more. The game is still very physical, but that first round is yeah, it's guys get real pumped for that because you can change your whole season around.
Yeah, and I mean at that point when you're fresh and especially like young and hungry teams, I yeah, like you nailed it on the head. It's a different brand of hockey, and to do that for 4 rounds, and then you hear the stories afterwards of the injuries guys played through, broken ribs and broken ankles, and it's crazy to think. And I know you played through your fair share of injuries, and it's got to take a lot to take you out of the game in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think most guys are going to play hurt during the playoffs. I
Yeah,
mean, if you're getting involved, you can't play outside the perimeter forever. You're going
no,
to have to get in front of the goalie. You're going to take a beating down low, and that's what defensemen try to do to you, do to the forwards. They're going to try and hurt them, try and beat up on them physically, and yeah, if you can hang in there, and you got to be smart about it too when there's contact. You got to know how to absorb contact and how to be smart about it because if you do happen to get by that first round, um, you know, it doesn't get any easier.
no,
Uh, but like I said, you do find that groove. And when
yeah,
when they're playing every other night, I always look for those teams. They're going to be playing well. So if
yeah,
you get through a playoff round where the other team has got to wait, it's not good for you. You may get
right,
to mend injuries a little bit, but you're playing on adrenaline anyways.
yeah.
So usually that time off, I think, hurts you more than helps you.
Yeah, it often seems to, and yeah, it was the case this year. So yeah, the playoffs, I mean, every year there's a Cinderella story. Every year there's a team that sneaks into the playoffs like Florida did this year. And, once they start to believe, once they got through that first round and they actually started believing, and then Bobrovsky just went on an absolute heater. I mean, he was on fire. Yeah, I thought the playoffs overall, I mean, a lot of people complain when there's no Canadian team or no original six team. I think that's garbage. I mean, every team deserves to be there. And if you want to look at their rosters, I think Vegas had 16 Canadian players on their roster. So look no further than that. The game's in a great place when the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights are playing each other in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, I don't think too many people could have said that 10 years ago,
No.
that this was going to be the look of the league. But I also think you said something very important, and that's about a confident hockey player.
Yeah.
I mean, a confident hockey player goes a long way. And that just confidence builds around the team, and they latch onto that and they ride that wave.
Yeah. It's fun to watch. I mean, you see so many guys performing over their heads, and it happens every year. And that's part of the reason why we love the game so much, Barry.
Yeah, well,
So,
sorry,
yeah,
Chris,
go
but
ahead.
that,
No,
you get me going when you start talking about the game.
I know there's no time limit. Don't worry.
There's, a lot of guys can make up for a lost season during the playoffs.
Yeah.
You just got to get into the playoffs. So now I think fans, I don't know if this is gonna. I hope it helps the game, but they're going to think about, the next team next year who wins the President's Cup. They're going to be waiting to see what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, this might have been a one-off with Miami, and I keep calling them Miami. I'm sorry,
That's all
with
right.
Florida,
Florida. Yeah.
with Florida and Boston, because Boston was just such a superior team throughout the whole year, and I don't think too many people had picked that series.
No, that was a bracket buster for sure.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone had that picked. Out of all the pools that I was in, I don't think anyone had Florida going past the first round. So yeah, all in all, great playoffs, and it'll be exciting to see. It's been a real buzz the last few days with free agency. I don't know if you had to deal with that all too much, Barry. The free agency frenzy on TSN.
yeah, no, no, there was no. Well, actually, it was just starting to come around. Um, they had during the draft, they had a few underage players that went to the WHA when
Yeah,
I was drafted in '77. Some younger players, and yeah, but there wasn't any free agency. The only way that you moved was if you got traded, and that's why the Islanders were such a powerful team in the early '80s because there was no player movement. They
right.
had those strong teams, and they just had to wait till their time was done, and
Yeah,
then a new team had come along. But I
right.
think it's going to be pretty tough to see teams do that nowadays with how many players are moving around. You can't blame the players for how much money that they make. I
Yeah,
mean, the owners are the one that go behind each other's back and sign guys, and the players know that they only have a certain window to make that money, and so yeah. But it's always interesting to see the player movement
yeah,
and how the faces of the game change so much. I keep going back to when I was playing, but when I first came in, there wasn't a lot of guys even wearing helmets then.
right.
So fans could really identify with players. And even when I was growing up, all we had was hockey cards and the one game a week on Hockey Night in Canada, which was either Toronto or Montreal.
Yeah,
And it was usually the people in the West were the Toronto fans, and then you had, of course, your Quebec province, which was
yeah.
always Montreal, and but yeah, our household was all Toronto Maple Leaf fans.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't listened to the first interview with Barry, as I said earlier, it was episode Hockey Talks Volume 22. It aired on July 17th, 2020. It's a real in-depth history of Barry's career. It's worth going back to listen. He's a six-year captain of the New York Rangers, played over 600 games in the NHL. just an absolute threat on the ice in all areas. Had a fantastic career. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, please do so. And Barry, so just after that podcast, unfortunately, your life changed very quickly after that due to the loss of your son. And we're wearing these shirts, as you can see, it says Brock and Mark, and this foundation has been established in memory of Brock and Mark. And I'd like for you to tell us, if I don't know how you put it into words, or just tell us maybe, just tell us what happened.
Yeah, well, my son had sort of found his direction in life and was attending university in Nova Scotia, and he was going there for mental health and recovery, and he had finished his first 2 years. He had come back to Binbrook, Ontario, to spend the summer before going back to school again, and was involved in a road rage incident where a group of young men followed him and his friend back to the house party that he was attending. And as they got out of the car, there was a fight that ensued, and my son was stabbed to death. And so we went through that. That was, of course, I don't want to say it's even shocking, because it was beyond that. And when you lose a child in that way, I mean, when you lose a child at all, but when you lose a child to such a senseless act, yeah, it was tough for our families to go through, and every day is tough.
Yeah.
And so from that, it took 4 months before the assailants were found, and we went through the court case. And to me, there was just no justice when somebody is handed a 3.5-year sentence at a plea bargain for manslaughter, just because there was a lack of evidence. There should have been more cameras throughout Binbrook that caught what was going on. But I get into that in the book that I write, called The Cell, which talks about my son's murder, and it also talks about the subsequent suicide of Mark Pavlich, which happened months after my son's murder. And so, yeah, I go through that. The book is called The Cell, CELL, because when these events happened to me, I was sort of thrust into this cell of trauma. And I had to, like any prisoner who was incarcerated, you try and find a way out all the time. And that's what I had to learn to do. Now, there was a lot of struggles. In the meantime, I became addicted to sleeping pills, and I had to go through that, and I went through rehab for that. And I was in therapy, and so I got a lot out of that, and I highly recommend for people that are going through any type of trauma to have a therapist help you and be able to talk about it. It's one thing to be able to talk about it with your friends, which is very helpful, and for you to be open and talk about it is a great thing for you to be able to do. It takes a lot of courage to be able to do that. And that's another reason why I wrote the book, is I thought maybe what has happened to me can help somebody else with what they're dealing with. I'd never heard of anybody being addicted to sleeping pills before. When I was in rehab, I was the only person out of 120 people. So I kept telling my counselor, I'm not supposed to be here.
Right.
I would have a heroin addict beside me, alcoholic, meth head, crackhead. And I kept saying, I got a sleeping disorder. I should be in like a sleeping hospital.
Right.
But the withdrawals that I went through when I wasn't using the sleeping pills were so heavy and so bad. I was in so much body pain that this sort of just reaffirmed to me that, yeah, I needed to get help. I tried to stop 7 or 8 times myself. I would go a week without sleeping, and that's as far as I could go. So yeah, when I was back in New York in September of last year, I ran out of sleeping pills, and they're easy to get here in Hong Kong, and it is quite a problem. It is quite a problem for especially foreign men working in Southeast Asia. If you put in long hours, you have to get up the next day and do it all over again. You don't sleep properly. You try a couple of sleeping pills, it works, and then your body becomes accustomed to it, and you just start using more, and that's what happened to me. And
Yeah, so it was interesting, the story of how you actually got into rehab and who started that for you in New York. Was that what you were going to get to?
yeah, well, I'd been to a golf tournament and I was guest speaking. Well, with the Rangers alumni, I did a presentation about really about Mark Pavlich and the ranch, which is located in Minnesota, which will be the opening day will be pretty quick here in a few days.
Oh,
And
excellent.
Teammates for Life, which is another foundation that I was able to help and be involved in. It's pretty hard for me to be involved being in Hong Kong, but
Mhm.
former players, Tom Gorence from the Flyers and Clint Malarchuk, mainly from Buffalo, as they put in a lot of work, and of course Mark's sister Jean and a lot of others. There's a great team that has been put in place, and we're trying to help. We're trying to help former players
Yeah.
and get the help that they need, because the NHL alumni just doesn't have the amount of social workers that it takes to be able to help former players. And there's a lot, especially around my age, that need help.
There certainly are. And you mentioned the word courage earlier, and I just wanted to go back to that because as I said to you, the courage and strength that you've shown throughout this whole process and what you've shared through social media is really, really inspiring. And I want to thank you for being so open and honest about that because it really, truly is helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Writing or the posts I make on Facebook, I mean, sometimes it may be a humorous story, or
Yeah.
other times I try to send a message when I write somehow. As
Mhm.
I said earlier, hopefully maybe it touches somebody and it helps somebody, so they will either reach out to get the help that they need or at least be able to talk about it.
And can you go back? How long did it take you? After your son was murdered and I'm I'm sure you can't even describe the feelings that were going through your mind and have the things that you had to deal with and go through. How long did it take you before you were able to kind of reach out and get some help? And what was the first step? Like, how could people learn from that?
Yeah, I think well, the first time was really when I knew that I needed to get help for my addiction. Was really the time, but it took time after that.
Yeah.
And you know, I got to be honest with you. The four young men that were involved, I wanted to kill them all.
Yeah, I'm sure
And
you did. I
I
mean,
did,
everyone would.
I did a lot of research and had friends research them, their families, where their families worked, where they lived, and yeah, I had some bad thoughts going through my mind, and I still do at times.
Hmm.
I still do. Um, people have told me, "Well, God will handle it, karma will handle it." Well, I've always thought just let Barry handle
Yeah, that's
it.
how
And
you've dealt with the things throughout your life, I'm sure.
not to talk about me as the third person, excuse me, but
Yeah, yeah.
I myself, um, because it was my son, I have some thoughts going through my head when he was stabbed. Well, he bled out less than a minute. An artery was severed in his stomach. What was he thinking? Or did he even have time to think that last minute? I know he would have been in shock.
Hmm.
Um, but I felt a lot of guilt because I wasn't there, and I have been in Hong Kong for 16 years. And but we had as close relationship as possible.
Hmm.
He and like I said, he had finally found his way,
Yeah,
and so I was very proud of him. Being a father was probably the best thing I've ever done in my life.
yeah. You're a great one too. Thank you for that. Um,
Like,
and I remember when you were telling me because we connected through the Nova Scotia thing. When I told you I was from Nova Scotia, you right away just
right.
big smile on your face. You're like, no way! Like my son is there right now. He's driving through Nova Scotia, or he's going back for summer holidays. It was like right around that time. So yeah. So you managed to I'm not to get through it, but getting through that, and then just a few months later, your good friend Mark Pavlik, who was struggling with addiction and mental health issues, and you were very candid sharing his story as well. And then you lose him. What's going through your mind at this point?
Yeah, well, I tell you, when I got the call on my son, my brother was the one who called me, and when he called me, I knew by the sound of his voice that something had happened. He
Mhm.
didn't get to it right away, but I thought it might have been my mother. And my mother's still alive at 96. God bless her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but when I got the call for Mark Pavlich, it was Clint Malarchuk, and it was the exact same tone that my brother had.
Mm.
So when he called me, I thought, "Oh, what's happened?" And yeah, Mark had, we think he had CTE,
Yeah.
and that is a degenerative brain disease where the shrinkage of the brain, and that they've done a lot of studies on it. There was a big lawsuit in the NHL, but nothing came of it.
Yeah.
I settled for $18 million. That was a settlement, but really that was nothing compared to the millions of dollars that the NFL received in former players with free
That's right.
medical. And, so, and with Mark had gotten into some trouble and had been incarcerated. And then they moved him to a psychiatric facility in Minnesota. And that's where he spent over a year. And I had tried to talk to him as often as possible.
Yeah.
Started every other day, then it was maybe every 3 days. And so we developed a rapport, and I was very close with him. And then we managed I should say, Clint Malarchuk, excuse me, and Jean, Mark's sister, did a lot of work to get Mark out of there and into the Eagles Healing Nest,
Yeah.
which is a place for veterans in Sauk Center, Minnesota. And that's, of course, where the ranch will be, is right there. And they help a lot of veterans. And we got Mark there. And then we thought he was in a good place. And I Zoomed with him 2 days before his suicide. And he was a fragile individual.
Yeah.
And I knew that when he was in the psychiatric facility. He had explained to me that he wasn't going to do that. He had a court case coming up, and I didn't think, or rather, he thought that wasn't going to go very well, and that might have had something to do with his decision to end his life. I mean, I think he was sick, and a lot of people might not have known that. Mark was a tough guy to get to know. But if you took the time to get to know him, there was a special individual there.
Yeah.
And, he played on that 1980 U.S. Olympic team.
Mhm.
He was instrumental in Mike Eruzione's final goal against Russia.
Yeah.
And the win goal, on the fourth goal, he assisted on the goal. And he was a catalyst for that team. But he was never one for the limelight. He just
Right.
he just loved playing hockey, as he did on the ponds of Minnesota when he was growing up.
Yeah.
Went to the university, Minnesota Duluth, and then he went on to play for the Rangers. And he was such a creative, great player for us. Yeah, was sad.
I can only imagine. I mean, yeah. Anytime you lose someone to suicide, there's always so many thoughts that go through your head, and so many regrets and things you should have, could have, would have done. And
Yeah, I think
it's hard to deal with. Yeah,
it's very confusing for people.
it is. It really, really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure you go into both of these stories in great depth in your book, Barry. Tell us a little bit about that. As you might have mentioned, you were not a writer, but this became a tool for you. And as I followed your journey, I noticed that yeah, I'll just let you tell it. Tell me a little bit about that process of writing.
Well, You won't have to Google any of my words. I can assure you that. As I said earlier, I started writing because it was therapeutic for me. I needed to, sort of kept the journal and put my thoughts down of what was happening.
Yeah.
And when my son was murdered, the police couldn't give us a lot of information because it was an ongoing investigation.
Right.
But I was there. I was there in Binbrook, Ontario, about 20 minutes from Hamilton in southern Ontario. And I got to know that town and I got a good feel for things. So I started to write. I started to write. I tried to contact as many people as I could, from the mayor of Hamilton to MPs in the area. I knocked on doors, and I think I did what any father would do, was just try to get the answers.
Right.
Now, when I was back there, this was during the height of COVID.
That's right.
So I couldn't attend the funeral or the viewing. I had to watch the service on the internet and watch the video of it. But our families were devastated, and it was like, how do we come back from that?
Yeah.
And how do we make something of our lives? First, by honoring my son, and I think that's what a lot of parents do who have lost children. They try and honor their child in a way to keep their memory going.
Yeah.
And that definitely helps.
Yeah.
You don't have to start a foundation to be able to do that.
No.
You just have to.
When you first started writing, was there any thoughts in your head that this is someday going to be a book, or was it more like a release? And
it was more, as I said, therapeutic to begin with.
Yeah.
But then when I started putting it together, I just thought that this could help somebody. And that was the whole point of really doing it, was maybe there's somebody out there that will read this, that will get help. Maybe it can change their life, and maybe in turn they'll help somebody else. And so that's the way that I looked at it. And I have my own writing style, I guess. I met a writer here in Hong Kong, and I gave him a copy of the book to read, and he really loved it and had a lot of great things to say about it. Because in the book, I play a lot of different characters. And I do the same when I tell hockey stories, because some of those stories are from 35 years ago, where I have to remember what I think the exact conversations are.
Right.
So I have to play different roles. I have to play the one asking the question and the one answering the question.
Right. Yeah.
And when I try and write, I try and put the reader right beside me, so that they're involved in the story and they want to read more, and they're engaged. And that's my style of writing.
I can't wait to read it. So when can we find it, and how's that process going?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Getting a book published is not as easy as I thought.
Yeah.
And I thought it would have been done by now. I just have to be patient because it's being worked on. I don't mean the book's being worked on. The book is finished. It's not perfect by any means, and never will be, but I think that everybody knows that there is nothing perfect to begin with. And so keep my fingers crossed. I'm hoping soon, because I hope that not only will that help somebody, but also, not to, well, I hope it continues to help me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That-
I'm sure
that-
it will.
I mean, I want to keep on writing, and if there's a good response from my book, then I already have most material ready for a second book to go, and I have ideas for a third and fourth book. So yeah, I sort of maybe can't use my body as much as I could, but my mind's still okay.
Your mind is still there,
My-
that's for sure. I know the boys
my friends,
the boys at Trivia Night said that your mind is still there. So
man, just thinking about that trivia night, I got to say thank you very much for inviting me.
yeah,
And,
that was a fun night.
I was pretty nervous going in there. I thought, I don't know any of these questions. What are these guys going to think about me?
Yeah, I'm sure.
but with the team I was on with Andrew Work and Mike Lamb, we managed to, between the three of us, come on strong in the third period, I guess you could say.
Yeah, you guys, it was a great night all around. So Barry, you don't know the exact date for the book, but folks, I will definitely share it. As soon as it comes out, we'll spread it out on social media. And in the meantime, fallenstars.org. We'll put the link in the description on the YouTube page and on our social media pages. These guys have great, I mean, if there's ever a foundation that, you know, needs some help and could help a lot of people in the world, this is the one. The Brock and Mark Foundation of fallenstars.org. They've got great gear. Check out this shirt. You know, it says respect mental health down the side. Great hats like this one. And all kinds of other great stuff on the website. Again, it's fallenstars.org. Barry, any last words about the book or anything else that's going on in your life?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance really to talk about Fallen Stars too much, but
yeah,
these are the Ranch Teammates for Life is
yes.
for Mark Pavlich, and Fallen Stars is for my son and Mark together. And really it's trying to help youth here in Hong Kong. You know, there's a high suicide rate for young men in Hong Kong. There's a lot of pressure on kids here to do well academically. And so I know with COVID, Hong Kong took a while to come out of COVID, and I really haven't been able to do the amount of work that I've wanted to. But I plan on getting more involved here, and really those two foundations are very important to me. And I'm very proud of all the work that people who have come along to help me and be involved. And yeah, they're very special to my heart.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. You got a great team around you, a lot of people who care. And so there you have it, folks. Barry Beck didn't just bring ice hockey to Hong Kong. He's given back to the community still to this day, even though it's not in the ice hockey world. And I think it's something, like you said, it's really important that we listen and we talk and we keep open about these things, because there's a lot of people going through things that you don't necessarily see.
True, Chris.
So Barry, look, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Continue being open and honest with us. We can learn from you. You're an inspiration, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Yeah, thank you. Look forward to talking to you again, Chris.
All right. That was Across the Pond, and that's a wrap.
Thank you to our amazing sponsors, the China Hockey Group, Wheel Hub Asia, AccessoryHouseGlobal.com, Yardley Brothers Beer, and of course, Sunset Studio. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Across the Pond HK. Email us, send in your comments and questions to the show at any time at acrossthepondhk@gmail.com.